All right, guys, today what I want to show you how to do is to score your survey on Qualtrics without using the statistics program SPSS. Now, most semesters in the past, we've used SPSS to take your downloaded data from Qualtrics and to use syntax and a variety of other features to create summed scores. But if all we're interested in, which we are for your projects, are summed scores, we can actually do this right on Qualtrics. And we're going to do it using a unique feature on their program called scoring. Now, the great part about scoring is you can use this feature whether or not you've already collected your data. So if people have already responded, you can actually go back in and score or edit the scores on each one of your measures. And when you output the data, it will actually show you those scores. But let me show you how to do it. So first of all, I've named this survey, I've named it How to Score Your Survey Without SPSS. Very clever, I know. What this actually is it's a copy of the moral identity inventory, which is a scale that has both a summed score as well as two subscales to it. So what I'm going to show you is how we can use each one, how we can calculate each one of those scales to create a score that'll show up on our data file. And then in the end, when you run your data, you're going to use those sum scores instead of your raw scores. Okay, so what I want to point out first of all is this is a prompt, there's no question here. Q1 includes all of the questions. So for each one of these items, they're supposed to look up at this list of things: caring, compassionate, fair, friendly, generous, and say how much they agree or disagree with each one of these questions. Now, some of these questions, like this one, it would make me feel good to be a person who has these characteristics, are scored positively, meaning the higher the score, like strongly agree, the higher that person's moral identity. Some of these, though, like this one, I would be ashamed to be a person who had these characteristics, are reverse scored. In other words, the higher their score, the more they agree with this, the lower their moral identity. Now, the great part about scoring is we can score individual items to either be positively or negatively scored. But let's get into it and I'll show you how we do it. The other thing I want to point out is this scale has two subscales to it. One of them is called symbolism or symbolization. Questions like this, feeling good to be a person who has these characteristics, has to do with the symbolic value of each of these identity qualities. There's other questions, though, that have to do with what they call, I'm sorry, these first ones are internalization, and these ones are symbolization. So it make me feel good to be a person is how much these qualities are internalized. Questions like this, I often wear clothes that identify me as having these characteristics, are how much these qualities are symbolized in my external appearance. So things like wearing clothes or doing things in my spare time show me as having these qualities. So what we're going to do is make up two subscales as well as a summed score. But let's get started. So in order to create a score, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the advanced question options, and then we're going to click on scoring. What scoring will do is it's going to bring us up another screen that allows us to create a variety of scores. So what we want to do here is we want to create a score. We could call it score, or we could actually we could create a whole brand new category. So one of the things we can do is we can create a category called moral identity inventory sum scale. Now, the nice part about this is, or we can call it actually total. What it's going to do is actually create a nice variable for us that will then allow us to download it as a variable in our survey. So let's save it. Okay, so now we have the MII total. So now what we want to do is we want to be able to create this kind of a summed score. So here we have MII total. We don't need to show people. If we ever wanted to, we could always show people their summed scores at the end of the survey, but I don't think for any viewers we need to do that. The other thing to note, though, in these scoring categories is what this will do is treat empty statistics as a zero. Okay, that's the only potential downside is if people skip questions here, it will count that as a 0. So it'll throw off that score a little bit. But for our purposes, that's just fine. So what we want to do is now we take a look over here at this first one. It would make me feel good to be a person who has these characteristics. So now for every single question on the survey, we want to give it a score all the way from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way from 1, all the way up to 7 for strongly agree. Okay, so one way we could do this is just to go across and type each one of these in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. But we got a lot of questions here, and most of them are going to be scored in this direction. In other words, for most of our questions, people who strongly agree are going to have high moral identities. So let's just go ahead and score everything in this category. Let's take this category, score everything here as a 1 to begin with. So now everyone who strongly disagrees with the question is going to get a 1. Disagrees, we'll give it a 2. Somewhat disagree is 3. In the middle is a 4. Somewhat agree is 5. Agree is 6. And strongly agree is 7. So now this actually works because we actually wanted all of our scores in this survey to count. Okay, we'll go through, we'll do the same thing down here. Let's see, it would make me feel good. Actually, all we need is this one survey here. We don't need the second one, that's just a copy of it. So let's do this. Now we need to see if there's any that need to be reversed. So being someone who has these characteristics is important. Nope, that sounds like identity. I often work close, that's the symbolization. I would be ashamed to be a person who has these characteristics. Now if someone's ashamed, we want someone really ashamed to have these caring characteristics. We want them to get a 1. And we want to reverse all these. So in other words, our highest scores are becoming low and our low scores are becoming high. We've now reverse scored. So that someone who disagrees with this, they say, I wouldn't be ashamed to have these characteristics, they're actually going to get the highest score for moral identity. The types of things I do clearly identify me, that's normally scored. The kind of books and magazines I read identify me. Having these characteristics is not really important to me. That's another reverse scored one. So what each of you guys are going to have in your surveys is some scores that will likely be reverse scored, meaning high scores are actually indicators of a low presence of that construct. The fact that I have these characteristics is communicated to others by membership. I'm actively involved in activities, and I strongly desire. So all these other ones are normally scored. It's just these 2 reverse score. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, these stay in there, and I'm going to go back to the editor now at this point. What I need to do before any of this counts is I need to publish it. So let me just show you. I'm going to publish it. Now, when people take it, so let's actually go, actually not data analysis, let's go and we're actually going to take our own survey here. And let's take the anonymous link. So this is what other people will be doing to take your survey. But for us, what we're going to do is have someone who is really high in moral identity. So notice they're answering low to the questions that don't really indicate them. So let's submit that. And let's go back one more time and we'll take the study again as someone who's pretty neutral in the middle. Okay, so now that we've got that, Now let's go back in and let's actually take a look at our data and what it looks like. So let's go back to our, let's go over to data and analytics. We're going to export our data. Go to SPSS. We're going to download it. Okay. And in just a moment, we'll take a look at that file and what that file looks like. That's our first one with only one measure. But we actually want to go back and we want to create subscores as well. So let's do this. Now we're going to kick back onto scoring. And we want to add a second category of score. Let's call this, let's manage our categories, and let's add a new category. We're going to call this MII symbolization. And we'll even add one more. We'll call it MII internalization. Those are the two subscales for this measure. Okay, we're going to save that. And let's go and edit the symbolization. Now for symbolization, we only want to choose those questions. Let's see what we can do. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing again, where we go set all these scores to 1, all these to 2, all these to 3, all these to 4, all these to 5, all these to 6, and all these to 7. Okay, this is our symbolization one. So we only want to include questions that ask about external behaviors. So this one, it would make me feel good to be a person who has these. That's an internalization, not a symbolization. So what we want to do is we actually want to delete that row. Being someone who has these characters is an important part of who I am. Nope, that's also about having an internalized moral identity, not symbolizing it. I often wear clothes that identify me. Yep, this is a symbolization. This is what we're looking for here. I would be ashamed to be a person who has these characteristics. Again, that's more about internalization. Remember, that's a reverse score. So we're going to clear those. The types of things I do in my spare time clearly identify me. Yep, that's symbolization. The kinds of books and magazines that I read, that's also symbolization. Having these characteristics is not really important to me. Nope, that's internalization. The fact that I have these characteristics is communicated to others by my membership in certain organizations. Yep, that's symbolization, so we're going to keep that one. I'm actively involved in activities that communicate to others that I have these. Yep, and I strongly desire to have these characteristics. Nope, that's internalization as well. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that have to do with symbolization. And what we're going to do is to save those. It says you're currently making edits. Changes won't be live until you publish. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to publish that just to be cautious and save our changes in there. Okay, now we want to go through and look, we can take a look at our total score. You can see everything's highlighted. Symbolization, only those ones are highlighted. Oops, symbolization, sorry about that. And look, I noticed I messed up the spelling of it. I can just go right back, change it, and it works just as well. Okay, so symbolization only has some. Let's do our last one, internalization. So now really quick, I see numbers 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10. 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10 are going to be my internalization. So let's do the same thing that we did before, which is make all these a 1, all these a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, now I'm going to delete the ones that have to do with symbolization. So wearing clothes, types of things I do in my spare time, the kinds of books I read, organizations, and activities. Those are all about symbolization and not internalization. So we'll take those away. Next, we had a couple that were reverse scored. So like I would be ashamed. Let's reverse score that to 7, 6, 5, we'll keep 4, 3, 2, 2, and 1. And having these characteristics is not really important to me. I want to reverse that as well. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. And we will publish those. Okay, now just to kind of show you how these work out differently, remember we had two scores before. One person who was high across the board, one person who was in the middle across the board. Let's do one more set of answers here. And this set of answers is going to be someone who has let's say someone who wants to show that they have these characteristics by doing certain things. So by reading books, by being a part of organizations, by being in activities. But in terms of feeling good about it, not so much. That doesn't really matter to me as much. So this is someone who should score high on the symbolization, all these questions, but low on the mid-range on the internalization. Okay, so let's do that and submit. And now we're going to go back to our survey again, and let's go check out and we'll download our data. And in just a moment on the next video, we'll take a look at what the SPSS files look like for each one of these. So we're going to export our data one more time using SPSS. And for the second file, we should have 3 responses, not 2, and we should see all the subscales broken up. Okay, so in the next video, we'll take a look at that file.